Today we are going to begin our investigation into sea otters, and we're going to look at two things about them. The first thing we're going to look at is our human history with them, and the second thing that we're going to look at is going to be how they are a keystone species in the environment. And as you do your case study after this introduction, you're going to look specifically at Glacier Bay, which is in Alaska, and how they have impacted that area. In the late 1700s, there began widespread hunting of the sea otters and other sea mammals. The sea otters were specifically prized for their thick pelts because they have up to 1 million hairs per square inch, whereas the average human has around 100,000 on their entire head. So their pelts are very, very thick. And during this time of hunting that started in 1740 and went into the early 1900s, there was hundreds of thousands of sea otters that were killed. You can see in this map right here that the original habitat of the sea otters was all of those areas that are circled in red. And the places now that are in the colored areas are the places where there are current populations. You can see how much more widespread their habitat was. By 1911, only around 2,000 sea otters, they estimated, were left in the entire Pacific coastline. And you can see where the stars are, the little pockets of places that were left where there were actual sea otters still living at the time. And in 1911, the United States, Great Britain, and Russia signed the Northern Fur Seal Treaty, which ended the hunting of many marine animals, including sea otters. Other human impacts on sea otter populations have been oil spills, like the Exxon Valdez pictured here in Alaska, where 42 million liters of oil were released into the ocean. It killed an estimated 2,500 sea otters. Sea otters also get caught in fishing nets, and they catch diseases from just things in the ocean, but also from humans flushing cat waste into the water system. It causes a parasite to get into the water where the otters live, and they die from that as well. So, despite the current threats to sea otters, the numbers have been increasing steadily since 1911 with the help of relocation programs and just them spreading in their populations as they've had these protections. So, there are approximately 150,000 of them in Alaska and the Aleutian Islands, and 17 to 18,000 in Russia and northern Japan, and an estimated 1,000 in British Columbia, and 2,000 in California, and 500 in Washington state. Some sea otter basics. Sea otters belong to the weasel family, and they are one of the marine mammals that we have here on Earth. They are one of the smallest. They have thick fur to keep them warm instead of a fat layer like most marine mammals do. They also are able to use tools. They take rocks and use them to pound open shells on their stomachs. They eat over 100 different species and each day eat around 25 to 40% of their body weight so that they can stay warm. But what makes them most important to the nearshore ecosystems in the Pacific is that they are a keystone species. Recap on what a keystone species is. They are species that whenever they are removed from an ecosystem, change that ecosystem drastically. It's a much larger change than removal of other species. So as we explore sea otters being a keystone species, we're specifically going to look at Glacier Bay National Park in Alaska. And this is because just 5 sea otters that were spotted there in 1995 have expanded into over 8,000 of them currently that are in the area. Um, and because they were first spotted there in 1995, and it's only been approximately 30 years of them being in that area, there is a lot of scientific evidence on what kind of impact that they've had on the environment. When sea otters are brought back to an ecosystem, they feed on many of the kelp grazing prey, like sea urchins. And this decreases the amount of organisms that eat the kelp, which allows the kelp forest to flourish. Whenever the kelp forests flourish, the result ripples through the ecosystem, and the area's numbers of species which is also known as the biodiversity of the area, increases as a result. It's amazing that these small marine mammals can help the overall health of an ecosystem so much. They increase the amount of producers, which, on a side note, is now being explored to see how much it's decreasing the amount of carbon dioxide we have in the atmosphere. And in addition to that, they also create more diversity in the food web. So their impact is huge.